Hi, this is Joy at Pine Quilt Shop. We are talking about making a fun hanging towel using the hanging towel kit from June Tailor. So I want to show you what comes inside your hanging towel kit package. So when you open it, you're going to have a front cover image that shows you what the towel looks like. The instructions are on the back side. And inside your package, you will have a piece of toweling and you will have a pre-printed piece of interfacing that will go inside the top part of your hanging towel. So that interfacing goes right here in the top part of your towel. So everything except the fabric comes in your kit. And when you go to pick your fabrics, you can make a couple different options as far as how you want to place your fabrics. You can use one fabric for the front of the body of the towel, the hanging towel holder, and you can use a different one for the back, like they did here. You've also got two trim areas, so you can use different fabrics for those. So you could use 4 different fabrics if you wanted to. You could use less if you chose to. It's totally up to you. And it's also fun for that little trim piece. If you have some ribbon, you could certainly use ribbon as the trim for that decorative trim on the bottom instead of fabric. It is totally up to you how you want to arrange your fabrics. So for the towel that I'm working on, I picked some fun hometown fabrics from Lori Holt, and I decided to use a different fabric for the front and as compared to the back. So I have one fabric that I'm using for the top trim and then different fabric for the front and the back, and I've made these sub-assemblies according to the pattern directions. So to finish the work on the top part of my towel, I'm going to put these right sides together, and the pattern gives you all the sizing instructions. And the one thing you want to make sure that you do is that you line up that seam line. And the easiest way to do that is to turn back, make sure they're lined up, and then go ahead and lay it down and put a pin in right there. And I would rotate it and do the same thing on the other side, get that lined up, and then go ahead and pin. So once I have those lined up and pinned, at that point I would take my interfacing, I'll cut where they say to cut. I'm just going to flip it back because I don't have a cutting mat to easily do this during the live, but you're going to cut right there. So I would cut right there, and that will get lined up. That cut edge will get lined up with the seam line on your fabrics. So that's why it's important to get that seam line lined up, then everything lines up good on your layers, and you can smooth the batting out. You're going to take a small ruler and extend your lines. So you can take just any kind of a marking pen. I like to use my Dritz Mark Begone Wash Away pen and extend that line out across the fabric. And the same thing on this side. Line it up with the printed line on the interfacing and extend the line out on the fabric. And that is where you're going to start to sew. Now, when you sew this, you're going to turn this later. So do make sure that you've got right sides together on your fabric. And you want to start to sew with a nice number of back stitches. I'll give it about a ½ inch on something like this that I know is going to get worked with and turned and handled. And I would start here, back stitch, then you're going to sew all the way around, just following that outline on the pre-printed interfacing. And when you get to this side, you'll follow that line that you drew, and again, back stitch at least 5 or 6 stitches. So you've got a nice back stitch on there. This is one that I have already sewn, and you can see my back stitching. And I've gone all the way around the edges, and I want to talk to you about how to reduce some of the bulk in the corners. So you have outer corners, and you want to clip those, and you can see where I've clipped that. Again, here's another outer corner. I've clipped that, I've clipped that, I've clipped that, I've clipped that. I try to clip to within about 1/8 of an inch from the stitched line. You also have inner corners here, and those inner corners need to be clipped as well. Now they get clipped a little different way. I'm going to flip this over because I think it's easier to see it on the fabric side, but you can see how I've actually just clipped right in, and I again will try to go to within a couple threads of the line of stitching, and I've done that on both sides. So it's clipped as well, but it's a different type of clipping for those inner corners, and that will allow it to turn and have nice square corners when you turn it. If you left that bulk in there and you didn't make that little clip there, it would not turn nicely. So at this point, I am ready to turn this particular hanging towel topper, and I'll gently push as much out as I can, just using my fingers. And then I have two turning tools that I really like to use when I'm working with things like this, and I use them both. I like the point-to-point turner from Clover, and I like the Expert Point and Press from OESD. So I'm going to start with the Expert Point and Press, and this has two different size ball ends. I'm going to start out with the bigger one, working on the end of my tea towel. And the nice thing with that big ball end is you're really pretty safe from a standpoint of not pushing it through the fabric. And I'll get most of that turned out, and then I'm going to flip it and use the small end just to do a little bit of final finishing so that I get a nice point on the end of my towel. Now the Clover point-to-point turner, what I like about it is it has this heel to it, and it's great for anytime you have curves, which I don't have here, but I will still use that heel to open up my straight seam. So I'm going to put my hand here, put a little tension on it, and I'll just run it down those straight edges. And you see how they're opening up and they're flattening out. Look at how much nicer that side looks compared to the side that I haven't done. And I'll go and I'll do the other side as well. So when you're doing point turning, a lot of people focus their point turner only on the corners, and they'll push those corners out, and sometimes you almost end up with like an arc in between because you haven't pushed the straight part out as well. So it's important to make sure you're pushing the straight part out, and the heel of the Clover point-to-point turner works great to do that. So push out the straight as well as the curves, but you can see with those notches I cut here, I have really nice square edges, and because I used a different fabric for the front and the back, when I fold this over to create the hanger part of my hanging towel, I will have another fabric in the mix. So I will put a button here, and I will make a buttonhole here that's the corresponding size so that I can hang this around maybe the handle of my stove or the handle on my refrigerator. And you can move it up and down a little bit if you're making it for yourself to kind of figure out how big you want this looped area to be. So that is how to make the top part of your towel, of your hanger. Now we're going to talk about how to prepare your towel. So let's talk about how to prep your waffle weave towel. So it's very important that you wash your waffle weave towel first. The pattern recommends zigzagging the edge of your waffle weave towel, and I did it with a brown thread so you could see it. And that will help to keep it from fraying out if you're going to machine wash your towel. I opted to just hand wash my towels. So I did one without stitching the zigzag stitching just to see how badly it frayed out. And with it being hand washed and just tossed in the dryer, you can probably get away without doing the zigzag stitching. If you are machine washing it though, definitely do the zigzag stitching so your towel doesn't fray out a lot while it's being pre-shrunk. I will do my washing with my towel with my water on medium, and my dryer on medium, I tend to pre-shrink things using the same washing temperatures that I would anticipate using for the finished item. So I did my pre-washing on medium and my dryer on medium, and that is my recommendation, is use what you're going to use after the item is finished. Now you'll notice the very bottom piece of waffle weave is unwashed. The top piece is the piece that I washed. You can see I had quite a bit of shrinkage along that side edge. Not so much along the top edge, but quite a bit along the side. And that is normal for toweling. It's important that you wash tea towels, flour sack towels, waffle weave toweling like this. Any kind of toweling is going to be a looser woven item, and they can shrink quite a bit. So you want to make sure you get that shrink out before you do any appliquing on them, before we use them in this hanging towel holder, before you do machine embroidery on them. Always wash them first to get that shrink out, and you're going to find that they're going to shrink more in one direction than the other, and that's just the nature of fabric. There is always one grain that is looser, the lengthwise or the widthwise grain, and is going to contract and shrink more. But definitely make sure that you pre-shrink your towel, because you don't want it shrinking after you have this made. Now, after you have pre-shrunk your towel, at that point, you are ready to hem it. And I started out hemming my towel. I got my Clover hot ruler out. I pressed my bottom seam. I turned it back a ½ inch. I pressed. I turned it back another ½ inch. I pressed and I sewed it. And then I started to do the same thing on my side. And I was like, oh, I'm getting way too much bulk in that corner. So I decided I was going to have to do a little unsewing, which I did on this side. And I unstitched enough that I could miter that corner. And if you look at the two, you can see there's a radical difference between the amount of bulk in those two corner seams. So I'm going to show you how to do the miter corner, but I want to just show you the last couple steps for finishing your towel first. So after I had my sides hemmed, I would add my trim, and now this could be ribbon or it could be fabric. I'm going to add it after I have hemmed my sides. So I will simply turn this back. I'll trim this to about a ½ inch, and I'm going to just line it up with the edge. And I'll do the same thing on the other side, and I'll just top stitch all the way around. Now, if you wanted to put your trim on first, you could, and then it would simply get folded right in to that side seam. I opted not to do that because I didn't want to add any more bulk in there. So I'm going to just add mine after the fact. And again, this could be ribbon, so you want to make sure you add that trim piece. Now, to finish the towel out, I'm not going to probably even worry about trimming that that zigzag off the top. I'll just leave that there because it's going to get tucked up inside your hanging towel holder. And you would fold accordion pleats in here. So you want to fold in some nice accordion pleats and get it to the size. And I'm not going to worry about folding mine nicely, but you want to get it to the size where you can tuck it inside your towel holder. And the pattern has great directions for this step, and then you're simply going to stitch there, and that's how you finish the towel. So let's talk more now about how to miter those corners, because that is an important step to get a nice finish on your towel. You can use this if you're doing a pocket on a tote bag that you're going to top stitch down. You can use this if you're doing hemming on toweling that you're buying on the yard. It will work for any kind of a corner where you want to reduce the bulk. So I'm going to show you with fabric because I think it's a little easier to see with a colored fabric versus the white waffle weave towel. So I'll use my hot ruler and I'll fold the fabric back to the ½ inch mark, and I'll press and I'll seam it really good. And then I'll back my hot ruler up and I'll again line up with that ½ inch line, make sure my ruler's tucked in there, and I'll press. And the nice thing with the hot ruler is you get a very flat edge and you can measure as you press. So I did that for both sides of this little sample corner that we're working with. And I took my clover or my Dritz Mark Be Gone pen, and I just marked in the pressed creases so that they were easier to see in the video. So this is my first fold, my second fold, my first fold, my second fold. Now to miter the corner, you want to come in and trim at least 1/4 of an inch past that line. I tend to go a little further. The Quick Trim and Circle ruler has intersecting lines that are recessed by 1/4 of an inch. So if you want to do 1/4 of an inch, it's easy to line that up with your one press line and your other press line, and you could trim right here, and that would leave you with 1/4 of an inch turn back. I like to have a little more because it just stays put better. So I tend to come out to the intersections in the corner of that box that has formed, and I normally will trim there. It gives me about a 3, for this particular size folded edge, it'll give me about a 3/8 of an inch turn back, and it just stays put better than 1/4. So I normally trim at those intersection points. So everything that's now covered by the ruler will be gone. So you're taking all of that bulk out of your corner, and it's amazing what a difference that makes. So I'm going to show you what it looks like when you go to the next step. So you want to fold that back. So you're folding it back right at that corner intersection. So just to bring this piece in, you want to fold that back so it's folded right there. So that's what you're looking for. And that's what I did here. I folded back right where that intersection was, and I pressed it. Then I went back and I reset my first fold and my second fold. And I did the same thing on the other side. And I just reset and pressed those really good. And there is the nice mitered corner that you end up with when you're done. And that will give you a nice bulk-free corner, a clean finish, no raw edges, and you can either top stitch this way and continue on and then come back and just do a little hand stitching in the miter, or you can sew here, sew down, cross, sew back. I would take a couple little tacking stitches there and then keep going around if you want to do it all by machine. And you'll have a nice, clean, and bulk-free corner then on your toweling when you go ahead and finish up making your hanging towel holder. So those are some tips and tricks that hopefully will give you a nicer finished product, whether you're making a hanging towel holder or doing any other project with toweling or fabric where you're having to make a pocket maybe perhaps that you're going to top stitch down. You can do that corner treatment for any of those and you'll have a nice clean finished corner that doesn't have a big bulky lump in it. Thanks for joining us today.